Three gangsters in a roadside diner thought they could harass a terrified waitress without consequence, convinced that fear would keep everyone silent. They didn't notice the quiet man in the back booth, a Navy SEAL named Liam, or the massive German shepherd watching their every move. When the leader put his hands on the girl, Liam didn't call the police. He simply stood up. In seconds, a moment of harassment turned into a brutal lesson in discipline, sparking a war that would force a soldier and his dog to burn a criminal empire to the ground. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. The windshield wipers of the battered Ford F-150 slapped back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the relentless Oregon downpour that shrouded the town of Oak Haven in a suffocating gray veil. Liam Brown, a 31-year-old active-duty Navy SEAL with a face carved from granite and eyes that had seen too much shadow, gripped the steering wheel with scarred knuckles. He was currently on a mandatory administrative leave, a forced vacation he neither requested nor wanted. Beside him sat Titan, a massive German shepherd with a coat of midnight black and deep tan, his intelligent amber eyes scanning the passing tree-line with a vigilance that mirrored his master's. "Looks like the whole world is crying today, buddy," Liam muttered, his voice a low, growly sound that barely rose above the hum of the engine. Titan let out a soft whine, shifting his weight. They were passing through Oak Haven, a logging settlement where the mist clung to the ground like a second skin, and the buildings looked as if they were slowly sinking into the sodden earth. Liam pulled the truck into the gravel lot of a roadside establishment, the neon sign above buzzing and flickering to spell out Rusty Spoon. He killed the engine. "Let's get some coffee. Stay close." They entered the diner, a bell jingling cheerfully above the door, a sound that seemed entirely at odds with the gloomy atmosphere inside. The air smelled of frying bacon, old coffee, and damp wool. Liam chose a booth in the far corner, a strategic habit he could not shake, offering him a clear view of the entrance. Titan slid silently under the table. A waitress approached, wiping her hands on a slightly frayed apron. This was Cassidy Vance, known as Cass, a 28-year-old woman with hair the color of roasted chestnuts tied back in a messy bun and eyes that held a spark of resilience despite the dark circles of exhaustion. "Afternoon," she said, her voice raspy from a long shift. "Menu's short today. Grill's acting up." She glanced down, her eyes widening slightly as she spotted the massive dog head resting on Liam's boot. "He's big. We don't usually allow dogs unless he's service." "He is," Liam lied smoothly, though in a way, Titan served a higher purpose than most pets. "Just black coffee, strong, and a plain beef patty for him. Rare. Charge me double for the trouble." Cass cracked a small, genuine smile. "I'll see what I can do. You passing through?" "Just driving," Liam replied, cutting the conversation short with a polite nod. "Fair enough," Cass said, writing on her pad. "Keep your head down. Weather's got everyone in a foul mood." The tranquility of the diner was shattered 10 minutes later when the front door banged open. Three men walked in, bringing with them a chaotic energy. Leading them was Ryland Vane, a young man in his early 20s dressed in a leather jacket that cost more than the average car in this town, with slicked-back blonde hair and a cruel, sneering mouth. Flanking him were Mick, a bald man with a neck tattoo, and Todd, a giant of a man who looked like he was carved from stone. "Well, well, look who's working the graveyard shift," Ryland announced, his voice booming. The few truckers in the room kept their heads down. Cass froze near the counter, her grip tightening on the coffee pot. "Hello, Ryland," she said, her tone icy. "Table or booth?" "I was thinking the counter." Ryland laughed, striding over and leaning heavily on the laminate surface. "Right here, close to you." Mick and Todd chuckled behind him, taking up positions that blocked the exit. "I'm working, Ryland," Cass said, pouring coffee for a trucker to avoid eye contact. "I don't have time for this. You always got time for me, babe." Ryland sneered, reaching over the counter to tap her hand. My brother Julian wants to know why you haven't paid the rent this month. I paid the landlord, Cass snapped, pulling her hand away. Your brother isn't my landlord. He owns this town, sweetheart. That makes him everyone's landlord, Ryland retorted, his voice dropping an octave, becoming menacing. And he's not happy you rejected his offer to host at the club. Liam watched from his corner, his coffee cup suspended halfway to his mouth. Titan let out a low rumble, a vibration Liam felt through the floor. Easy, Liam whispered. Wait! Ryland walked around the counter, ignoring the staff-only sign. You think you're better than us? Ryland demanded, cornering Cass against the pie display. You're just a waitress with a debt. Get out from behind here, Ryland, Cass shouted, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. I'm calling the sheriff. Sheriff's busy, Mick laughed from the main floor. Watching the game? Ryland grabbed Cass by the upper arm, his fingers digging into her uniform. Come on, let's go for a ride. Show you my new car. You can work off some of that debt. Let me go. Cass struggled, but Ryland was stronger. He shook her. Don't make a scene, Cass. You know, no one here is going to help you. I wouldn't be so sure about that. A calm voice cut through the tension. Ryland froze and turned his head. Liam was standing up, unfolding his frame from the booth. He didn't look angry. He looked bored. Ryland sneered, looking Liam up and down. Who the hell are you? The health inspector? Mick and Todd stepped forward, cracking their knuckles. I'm the guy asking you nicely to let the lady go, Liam said, walking slowly toward them. Walk away, kid, before you do something you can't undo. Ryland laughed, a sharp barking sound. You hear this guy? He thinks he's a hero. Ryland didn't let go of Cass. Instead, he pulled her tighter. This is private business, stranger. Go back to your coffee. It stopped being private when you put your hands on her, Liam said, stopping 5T away. Last warning. Get him, Todd, Ryland ordered, bored. Break his legs. Todd roared and charged like a bull. You're dead meat, the giant yelled. Liam didn't flinch. As Todd swung a massive fist, Liam ducked under it with fluid grace. Too slow, Liam murmured. He drove his fist into Todd's solar plexus, then swept his legs. Todd crashed to the floor, gasping for air. Mick hesitated, eyes wide. What are you waiting for? Ryland shrieked, shoving Cass aside so hard she hit the counter. Get him! Mick pulled a switchblade. I'm gonna cut you, man! Liam stepped forward, ignoring the knife. He caught Mick's wrist mid-thrust, twisting it until the bone snapped with a dry crack. Mick screamed, dropping the knife. My hand! You broke my hand! Liam silenced him with a precise chop to the throat, sending him crumpling to the floor next to Todd. Now it was just Ryland. The arrogance had drained from his face, replaced by pure terror. He backed up, hands raised. Wait, do you know who my brother is? I don't care, Liam said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. He closed the distance. Ryland tried to throw a desperate punch. Stay back. Liam caught the fist effortlessly. You have bad form, Liam critiqued coldly. He twisted Ryland's arm behind his back, forcing him face first onto the counter. Ryland whimpered. Please, I'm sorry. Liam leaned down, speaking into Ryland's ear. Apologize to her. What? Ryland gasped. Liam applied more pressure. I said apologize. I'm sorry, Cass. I'm sorry, Ryland yelled. Liam yanked him up and marched him to the door, kicking it open. He threw Ryland into the mud, then dragged the groaning Mick and Todd out, dumping them in a heap. Tell your brother, Liam called out into the rain, that if he sends boys to do a man's job, they're going to get hurt. He shut the door and turned back. The diner was silent. Cass was rubbing her arm, staring at him. You, she started, her voice shaking. You didn't have to do that. You don't know who they are. I know enough, Liam said, walking back to his table to retrieve his jacket. He threw a stack of bills on the counter, for the damage and the coffee. Cass looked at the money, then at him. "They'll come back, Julian. He doesn't let things go." "Neither do I," Liam replied. He signaled Titan. "Let's go, boy." As he reached the door, Cass called out, "Wait, what's your name?" Liam paused, hand on the handle. He looked back, his expression softening just a fraction. "Liam, and the dog is Titan. I'm Cass," she whispered. "Thank you, Liam." He nodded once, then stepped out into the storm, the heavy door closing behind him, leaving Cass wondering if the man and the beast had been real or just a fever dream brought on by the rain. The rain in Oak Haven did not cleanse. It only seemed to weigh things down, pressing the gloom deeper into the cracked asphalt of the diner parking lot. Liam Brown zipped his jacket higher against the biting wind as he stepped out of the Rusty Spoon, Titan trotting faithfully at his heel. His mind was already calculating the drive to the next town, eager to put the sullen faces of the locals and the memory of the broken bones behind him. But as he rounded the corner to where his Ford F-150 was parked, his steps faltered, coming to a halt with a controlled stillness that was more dangerous than an outburst of rage. The truck, his mobile sanctuary, was sitting awkwardly on its rims. All 4 tires had been slashed, the rubber gaping open like jagged wounds, hood unlatched, slightly ajar. Liam lifted it to find the spark plug wires severed and the battery cables stripped. It was not just vandalism. It was a message. It was a tactical grounding. He ran a hand over the cold metal of the fender, his jaw tightening. Titan sensed the shift in his master's mood, a low growl rumbling in the shepherd's chest as he sniffed the air, smelling the lingering scent of the perpetrators. They were stuck. Across town, the atmosphere was far more volatile in the office of Julian Vane. The room was a shrine to self-importance, paneled in dark mahogany and smelling of expensive leather and stale cigar smoke. Julian, a man in his early 40s with slicked-back silvering hair and eyes as cold and flat as a frozen lake, stood by the window looking out at the rain. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that looked out of place in a logging town, a visual reminder of his separation from the common rabble. Behind him, Ryland sat on a plush sofa, his arm encased in a fresh plaster cast, his face swollen and bruised. He was whining, a pitiful sound that grated on Julian's nerves. Ryland wanted revenge. He wanted blood. He demanded that Julian send the boys to kill the drifter. Julian turned slowly, his silence silencing Ryland mid-complaint. He was not a thug like his brother. He was a businessman who dealt in fear and leverage. He picked up the phone and dialed a familiar number. Moments later, the heavy oak door opened and Sheriff Brody Miller walked in. Miller was a heavy-set man in his 50s, his uniform straining against a protruding gut with a face that was perpetually sweaty and eyes that shifted nervously, avoiding direct contact. He was the law in Oak Haven, which meant he was Julian's employee. Julian didn't shout. He spoke with a quiet, terrifying calm. He instructed Miller that the stranger was not to leave town. He wanted Liam squeezed, isolated, and desperate before they crushed him. Miller nodded, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, promising that the investigation into the diner brawl would require Liam to remain in the jurisdiction. With no vehicle, and the sun beginning to dip below the jagged tree-line, Liam had no choice but to check into the only lodging within walking distance, the Pine Cone Motel. It was a decrepit L-shaped building with peeling paint and a neon sign that buzzed like an angry hornet. The room smelled of mildew and cheap lemon cleaner. Liam tossed his duffel bag onto the sagging bed and checked the window locks. They were flimsy. He wedged a chair under the door knob, a habit born of years in hostile territories. Titan hopped onto the foot of the bed, watching as Liam cleaned his sidearm, a Sig Sauer P226 that he carried legally but discreetly. The weapon was disassembled and reassembled in seconds, a meditative practice. The rain drummed relentlessly against the glass, a rhythmic backdrop to his planning. He needed parts for the truck, but he suspected no mechanic in town would sell to him. He was weighing his options, theft or intimidation, when a tentative knock sounded at the door. Titan's ears perked up, but he didn't growl. He recognized the scent. Liam opened the door to find Cass standing there, drenched, clutching a brown paper bag. She looked smaller in the doorway, vulnerable yet determined. She had come to warn him, she said, stepping inside as he held the door open. She unloaded containers of hot stew and bread, a peace offering. She told him about Julian Vane. She explained that Julian wasn't just a gangster, he was the town's infection. He owned the mill, the land, and the sheriff. Ryland was just the loud, stupid symptom of the disease. Julian was the virus. Liam listened, eating the stew, realizing the complexity of the web he had walked into. As they talked, Titan nudged Cass's hand with his wet nose. Cass froze for a second, intimidated by the beast, but Liam gave a small nod of permission. "He likes you," Liam said softly, a rare warmth entering his tone. "He's a good judge of character." Cass scratched behind Titan's ears, and the formidable war dog leaned into her touch, his tail thumping rhythmically against the floor. For a moment, the grim reality of the motel room faded. Liam watched them, a strange pang of domesticity hitting him, something he hadn't felt in years. He warned her that being seen with him was dangerous, but Cass shrugged, a spark of defiance in her eyes. She said she was done being afraid. When she left, disappearing back into the rain, the room felt colder than before. Night fell heavy and absolute over Oak Haven. Liam turned off the lights, plunging the room into darkness. He didn't sleep in the bed. He laid a blanket on the floor in the corner, the tactical strong point of the room. Titan lay near the door, a silent sentinel. Hours passed. The rain slowed to a drizzle. Then the sound of tires on gravel crunched outside. Not a passing car, but one that rolled to a stop with its lights off. Titan's head lifted, a low, guttural vibration rising in his throat. Liam was instantly awake, his hand wrapping around the grip of his pistol before he decided against it. Gunshots would bring the corrupt sheriff, giving them a legal excuse to lock him up. He holstered the gun and drew a serrated combat knife instead. The lock on the door clicked. The chair wedged under the knob groaned. Someone was trying to pick it. Then a heavy boot kicked the door near the hinges. Wood splintered. The door flew open, and 3 silhouettes spilled into the room, armed with baseball bats and tire irons, silent weapons for a silent beating. They expected a sleeping victim. They found a nightmare. "Titan fast!" Liam whispered the command. The German Shepherd launched himself from the shadows like a guided missile. He slammed into the lead intruder, his jaws locking onto the man's padded forearm. The man screamed, dropping his bat as the sheer weight of the dog drove him to the carpet. Chaos erupted. Liam moved with the silence of a ghost. He didn't turn on the lights. He used the darkness as his ally. The second attacker swung a tire iron wildly, searching for a target. Liam stepped inside the swing, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it with brutal efficiency. He drove a knee into the man's ribs, feeling bone give way, and shoved him into the wall. The third man, realizing the ambush had failed, tried to fumble for a flashlight. Liam was already on him. He grabbed the man by the collar and belt, using the attacker's own momentum to hurl him through the closed window. Glass shattered explosively, the noise echoing through the night. The man landed in the mud outside, groaning. Inside, Titan was standing over the first man, growling inches from his face, daring him to move. The second man was curled up on the floor, wheezing. Liam stood in the center of the room, knife held in a reverse grip, his breathing controlled. He reached out and flipped the light switch. The sudden glare revealed the attackers, hired thugs, local muscle looking to earn a bonus from Julian. They looked terrified. Liam didn't cut them. He didn't need to. The message was clear. He knelt beside the man Titan had pinned. "Go back to Julian," Liam said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Tell him he missed. He whistled, and Titan released the man, stepping back to Liam's side, his muzzle wet with saliva, but no blood. The thugs scrambled over each other to escape, dragging their injured comrade, fleeing into the night as if the devil himself was chasing them. Liam watched them go, then looked at the broken door and the shattered window. He knew this was just the probing attack. The war had officially begun. He holstered his knife and patted Titan's head. "Good boy," he murmured. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we hunt." The morning sun over Oak Haven did little to dispel the chill that had settled into Liam Brown's bones. A cold that had less to do with the Oregon mist and more to do with the realization that he had stepped into a war zone, not a vacation spot. He stood in the wreckage of his motel room, taping a heavy plastic sheet over the shattered window, his movements precise and economical. The previous night's attack had been too coordinated, too professional for a simple grudge over a bar fight. These weren't just ruffians defending their ego. They were soldiers protecting an asset. Liam needed intel, and he needed it before the town woke up. Leaving Titan to guard their limited gear, Liam slipped out, blending into the early morning shift of mill workers trudging toward the industrial district. He observed the flow of traffic, his eyes trained to spot anomalies. The logging trucks rolling out of the Vane lumber mill were riding low, heavy on their suspension, which was normal for timber. But the security at the gate was excessive. Armed guards with military reposture, checking paperwork with a scrutiny that suggested they were moving gold, not pine. Liam found a vantage point on a ridge overlooking the loading bay, using a small monocular he kept in his jacket. He watched as a forklift carefully maneuvered a crate labeled machinery parts between stacks of cedar. The crate snagged on a nail, tearing a strip of wood away to reveal the dull, unmistakable sheen of a polymer rifle stock. It was an AR-15 platform, likely modified for full auto. Illegal, highly profitable. And judging by the volume of trucks, Julian Bain wasn't just a local kingpin. He was a major artery in an interstate arms trafficking ring. While Liam was conducting his reconnaissance, his past came calling. He retreated to a secluded patch of forest near a cell tower to get a signal, pulling a secure encrypted satellite phone from a hidden compartment in his boot. He dialed a number that didn't exist in any public directory. The voice on the other end was gruff, sounding like gravel tumbling in a dryer. This was Commander Mike Iron Sterling, Liam's commanding officer, a man of 50 with a crew cut that defied time and a scar running from his ear to his jaw. Sterling was the only reason Liam wasn't in a brig somewhere for insubordination on a previous mission. Brown Sterling barked, skipping pleasantries. "Your tracker shows you're static in Oregon. I told you to disappear, not take root." Liam kept his voice low. "Situation is fluid, Commander. I've got a visual on a domestic arms pipeline, military-grade hardware moving through a civilian logging operation." There was a pause on the line, heavy with static. "That's ATF jurisdiction. Liam, you are active duty Navy, currently on administrative hold pending the inquiry. You do not have authorization to engage. If you make noise, I can't protect you. You're a ghost right now. Stay that way." "I can't just walk away, sir," Liam replied, watching a truck rumble past. "They're hurting civilians. You're not Captain America, Brown. You're a seal on thin ice. Do not engage. Sterling out." The line went dead. Liam stared at the phone. He respected the chain of command, but his moral compass pointed true north, and north was currently burning. He pocketed the phone. He wouldn't engage as a SEAL. He would engage as a concerned tourist who happened to be an expert in demolition. Meanwhile, the tentacles of Julian Bain's influence were tightening around Cassidy Vance. She sat in the sterile beige office of Mr. Arthur Finch, the town's only banker and Julian's personal financial lapdog. Finch was a thin, nervous man with spectacles that constantly slid down his greasy nose and a habit of clicking his pen when he lied. He pushed a document across the desk toward Cass. "I'm afraid the terms of the loan have been reassessed," Finch stammered, avoiding her gaze. The medical debt from your mother's cancer treatments was consolidated and purchased by Vane Holdings last week. Cass felt the blood drain from her face. You can't do that. I have a payment plan. I haven't missed a month. The clause in the contract allows for immediate recall of the principal amount if the asset, your home, is deemed at risk, Finch recited mechanically. Mr. Vane feels the property is deteriorating. He demands full payment by the end of the week or foreclosure proceedings begin. Cass stood up, her hands trembling, not with fear, but with fury. This isn't about the house. It's because I won't sleep with his brother. It's blackmail. Finch polished his glasses frantically. It's business, Miss Vance. Purely business. I suggest you speak to Mr. Vane directly. He might be amenable to an arrangement. Cass grabbed the paper and stormed out, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. Julian wasn't just going to hurt her, he was going to erase her existence in Oak Haven. She had nowhere to turn except perhaps the stranger with the wolf dog who had saved her once already. Nightfall brought a thick blanket of fog to the lumber yard, perfect cover for a man who thrived in the shadows. Liam returned to the Vane lumber mill, this time with Titan. They moved like smoke through the perimeter fence, Liam cutting the wire with silent precision while Titan watched for patrol dogs. They navigated the maze of stacked timber, the smell of sawdust and diesel thick in the air. Liam's objective was simple: evidence and disruption. He needed proof to force Sterling's hand or bring in the feds, and he needed to slow Julian down to buy Cass time. They reached the main warehouse where the special shipments were processed. Through a gap in the sliding doors, Liam saw the operation in full swing. Julian was there inspecting open crates of assault rifles and grenades, looking pleased. Ryland was there too, his arm in a sling, kicking at a worker who was moving too slowly. Liam pulled out a small digital camera and snapped several high-resolution photos. Evidence secured. Now for the disruption. He signaled Titan to stay low behind a stack of pallets. Liam climbed the maintenance ladder of a massive overhead crane that spanned the length of the loading bay. He moved along the catwalk high above the oblivious criminals. His target was the main winch holding a suspended load of massive raw timber logs positioned directly above the staging area where the weapons crates were stacked. He didn't want to kill them. That would bring a murder investigation. He wanted to hurt their wallet. He wanted to humiliate them. As he worked on the brake mechanism, intending to sabotage it to look like a mechanical failure, a rusted grating squeaked under his boot. Below, a guard looked up. "Hey, someone's up there!" The shout echoed through the warehouse. Julian looked up, his face twisting in rage. "Kill him!" he screamed. Bullets began to ping off the metal catwalk, sparks flying near Liam's face. Liam didn't panic. He didn't return fire. He didn't run. Instead, he accelerated his plan. He jammed a pry bar into the release gear and kicked it with all his strength. The brake shattered. "Heads up!" Liam roared, his voice booming over the gunfire. Gravity took over. The massive bundle of logs weighing tons plummeted downward. The guards and Julian scattered like cockroaches. The logs crashed into the stacks of weapon crates with the force of a meteor strike. Wood splintered, metal crunched, and the delicate explosives inside one of the crates detonated from the impact. A fireball erupted, not huge, but enough to set the sawdust and dry timber ablaze. The sprinkler system triggered instantly, turning the warehouse into a chaotic storm of water, smoke, and fire. "My guns, my money!" Julian shrieked, watching $1 million worth of merchandise turn into scrap metal and ash. High above, Liam disappeared into the smoke, sliding down a support cable to rejoin Titan. They vanished into the night before the first siren wailed, leaving behind a scene that looked like a tragic industrial accident, but felt like a declaration of war. The stench of burnt timber and wet ash still hung heavy over the town of Oak Haven, a physical reminder of the humiliation Julian Vane had suffered the night before. In his office, the air was even more toxic. Julian stood behind his desk, his hands gripping the edge so tightly that his knuckles were white. The loss of the weapons shipment wasn't just a financial blow, it was a signal of weakness. And in his world, weakness was a death sentence. He needed to reassert dominance, and he needed to do it violently. Standing before him was a new figure, a man who made the local thugs like Ryland look like children playing dress-up. This was Cale, a mercenary commander who had washed out of a foreign legion for excessive brutality. Kyle was a man of 40 with a shaved head and a jagged scar running from his left eye to his jawline, a permanent sneer carved into his face. He wore a tactical gear that was functional, not showy, and carried himself with the coiled stillness of a viper. Julian threw a stack of cash onto the desk. "I want him dead," Julian hissed, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Put a bounty on the street, 500,000 for the head of the drifter. But first, I want him to suffer. He thinks he's a hero. He thinks he can save people. Bring me the girl." Julian's eyes gleamed with malice. "Take the waitress. Use her as bait. If he comes for her, kill him. If he doesn't, she pays her debt in blood." Cale nodded once, pocketing the details. "Consider it done." At the Rusty Spoon, the lunchtime rush was non-existent. The town was on edge. People could feel the storm brewing. Cass was wiping down the counter, her movements mechanical. She was exhausted, her mind racing with the threats from the bank and the image of Liam walking into the rain. She hadn't seen him since the night at the motel, but she knew he was still out there. The door chimed, but instead of a hungry trucker, Kyle walked in, flanked by two armed professionals. The shift in atmosphere was instant. These men didn't swagger. They moved with efficient, predatory purpose. Kyle walked straight to the counter. "Cassidy Vance," he said, his voice like grinding stones. "Shift's over." Cass didn't scream. She didn't reach for the phone. She stiffened, gripping the rag in her hand, her eyes locking onto Cale's. "I'm working," she said, her voice steady despite the fear hammering in her chest. "Get out." Kyle reached over the counter, not to grab her, but to rest a heavy pistol on the laminate surface. That wasn't a request. Mr. Vane wants a word. You can walk, or you can be dragged." Cass looked at the gun, then at the few terrified customers. She knew resisting here would get innocent people hurt. She untied her apron and threw it down. "You tell Julian," she said, her chin held high, "that he's a coward." Cale smirked, a chilling expression. "Tell him yourself." They marched her out the back door into a waiting black SUV. From a ridge overlooking the town, Liam lowered his binoculars. He had been watching the diner, expecting retaliation, but he hadn't expected the speed of it. "They took her," he muttered. Titan, sensing the change in Liam's pheromones, let out a sharp bark. The dog's body language shifted instantly. The playful pet was gone. The war dog was back. The fur along Titan's spine stood up, his muscles bunching for action. Liam sprinted to where he had stashed a vehicle he had commandeered from a Vane associate earlier that morning. A modified matte black Dodge Charger with a reinforced chassis built for running moonshine and timber on these treacherous roads. He threw the door open. "In!" he commanded. Titan leaped into the passenger seat, bracing himself. Liam fired the engine, the V8 roaring to life like a waking dragon. He slammed the car into gear, gravel spraying as they peeled onto the main road. The hunt was on. The chase began on the outskirts of Oak Haven, where the asphalt turned slick with rain and mud. Liam spotted the black SUV speeding toward the mountain pass, the only route to Julian's secluded estate. He floored the accelerator. The Charger surged forward, closing the gap. Inside the SUV, Cale saw the approaching vehicle in the rearview mirror. "We have a tail," he announced calmly. "Deal with it." The back window of the SUV rolled down and a gunman leaned out, opening fire with an automatic rifle. Bullets sparked off the pavement and pinged against the Charger's hood. Liam didn't flinch. He swerved violently, using the car's weight to drift through the corners, keeping the engine block between himself and the gunfire. "Get down!" he shouted to Titan. The dog curled low in the footwell, disciplined and silent. Liam wasn't just driving, He was weaponizing the car. He drafted behind the SUV, waiting for the road to narrow. The road wound upward, flanked by a sheer cliff on one side and a dense forest on the other. It was a death trap. Liam saw his opening. As the SUV slowed for a hairpin turn, Liam upshifted and rammed the back corner of the enemy vehicle. The impact was deafening. Metal crunched and glass shattered. The SUV fishtailed, the driver fighting for control. Kyle cursed, firing his own weapon through the back windshield. The windshield of the Charger shattered, showering Liam in safety glass, but he kept his foot pinned to the floor. He pulled alongside the SUV, trading paint, grinding metal against metal, sparks flying like fireworks in the rain. He looked over. He could see Cass in the back seat, struggling with her captors. Her eyes met his wide, terrified, but alive. He rammed them again, harder this time. The SUV's tire blew out. It swerved wildly, crashed through the flimsy guardrail, and skidded to a halt, its front wheels hanging precariously over the abyss of the canyon below. The SUV rocked, metal groaning under the strain. It was teetering, balanced on a knife's edge. Kyle and the driver kicked their doors open and scrambled out onto the wet asphalt. Realizing the vehicle was doomed, they raised their weapons to shoot Liam, but Titan was already moving. As Liam skidded the Charger to a halt, blocking the road, he shouted, "Titan, go!" The dog launched himself out of the window, a black blur of fury, taking Cale down before he could pull the trigger. Liam didn't look at the fight. His eyes were on the SUV. It shifted again, sliding another inch forward. Cass was trapped in the back, the child locks engaged, pounding on the glass. The vehicle groaned, tilting downward. There was no time to anchor it. Liam sprinted toward the edge. He didn't stop. He leaped from the solid ground, landing on the hood of the teetering SUV. The vehicle lurched violently under his added weight, dipping further. Below, a drop of 300 FT waited. "Don't move! Move!" Liam shouted to Cass, pulling his combat knife. He scrambled up the sloping hood to the windshield. He smashed the glass with the pommel of his knife, clearing the jagged shards with his gloved hands. "Give me your hand." Cass reached out, her fingers brushing his. The SUV gave a sickening lurch, sliding another foot. Gravity was winning. Liam grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron. "I've got you," he grunted. With a heave of superhuman effort, he pulled her through the broken windshield. "Jump!" Liam roared, hauling her onto the roof. He threw her toward the asphalt just as the chassis snapped. The SUV tilted past the point of no return. Liam launched himself backward, his boots kicking off the roof as the vehicle plummeted. He hit the wet pavement hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Behind him, the SUV vanished into the fog, the crash echoing seconds later like distant thunder. He looked up. Cass was lying on the road, gasping for air. Safe. Titan was standing over Cale, who lay unconscious and bleeding while the other mercenary had fled into the woods. Liam scrambled over to Cass. "Are you hit?" he asked, checking her for injuries. She shook her head, grabbing his jacket, pulling him close. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I told him you would." Liam looked at the road. Police sirens were wailing in the distance, Julian's corrupt sheriff coming to clean up the mess. They couldn't stay. "We have to move," Liam said, helping her up. "The road is compromised. We go into the trees." He whistled for Titan. The dog abandoned the fallen mercenary and trotted over, alert and unharmed. Together, the three of them crossed the guardrail and vanished into the dense, dark forest of the Pacific Northwest, leaving the burning wreckage of the chase behind them. They were alive, but they were now hunted in the wild, crossing the thin line between civilization and survival. The Oak Haven National Forest was a sprawling, ancient beast of cedar and fir, a place where the sunlight struggled to pierce the canopy even on a clear day. Under the relentless Oregon drizzle, it became a labyrinth of shadows and slick mud. Liam Brown moved through the undergrowth with a silence that seemed unnatural for a man of his size. He was no longer just a driver or a tourist. He was a Tier 1 operator in his natural habitat. His left leg dragged slightly, a souvenir from the car crash, but his pace was relentless. Beside him, Titan moved like a ghost, his paws placing carefully on moss rather than dry twigs, his ears swiveling to catch the distant baying of hounds. Behind them, Cassidy Vance struggled to keep up. Her waitress uniform was torn and muddied, her sneakers sliding on the wet leaves, but she didn't complain. She clamped her jaw shut, forcing her body to obey the desperate command to survive. They were being hunted. Julian Payne had escalated the conflict from a gang dispute to a paramilitary operation. He had called in a specialized tracking team led by a man named Silas. Silas was a contract tracker from the brutal wilderness of the Yukon, a man of 50 with skin like weathered leather and eyes that constantly scanned the horizon. He didn't use technology. He used a pack of Dobermans and an innate predatory instinct. He was leading a squad of 6 heavily armed mercenaries, moving methodically through the woods, closing the net around Liam. Liam stopped abruptly, raising a clenched fist. Cass froze, her chest heaving. "They're close," Liam whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. "The dogs are picking up the scent." He looked around, analyzing the terrain, not as a landscape, but as a tactical board. "We need to slow them down." He knelt by a cluster of saplings. He didn't have claymores or trip flares, so he used what the forest provided. He bent a young, flexible sapling down, securing it with a complex knot tied to a root, and sharpened a thick branch into a crude, pungy stake. He positioned it at knee height, camouflaging the trigger mechanism with fern leaves. It was a primitive trap, a Malay whip designed not necessarily to kill, but to maim and demoralize. "Watch your step," he murmured to Cass, guiding her around the kill zone. Psychological warfare. If they fear the ground they walk on, they move slower. They pressed on, the terrain rising steeply as they approached the foothills of the Black Ridge. The temperature was dropping, the rain turning to a biting sleet. They found temporary refuge in a shallow limestone recess hidden behind a curtain of ivy, a small cave barely large enough for the 3 of them. It was damp and cold, but it offered cover from the thermal scopes Liam suspected the mercenaries might have. Inside, the adrenaline that had fueled them began to fade, replaced by the throbbing pain of injuries. Liam slumped against the cold rock, grimacing as he peeled back his jacket. The crash had driven a shard of glass into his side just above the hip. It was bleeding sluggishly. Cass saw the blood and immediately moved to his side. "Let me see," she said, her voice firm. She ripped a strip of clean cloth from the hem of her apron. "I'm not a doctor, but I know how to stop a bleed." Liam watched her. Her hands were shaking, but her movements were deliberate. She cleaned the wound with water from his canteen and packed it tight. There was a shift in the air between them. In the diner, he had been the savior, and she the victim. Here, in the dirt and dark, they were partners. "You're doing good," Liam grunted, the praise genuine. "Most people would have broken by now." "I've been dealing with Vane my whole life," Cass replied, tying off the bandage. "I guess I was just waiting for a reason to fight back." Liam nodded, reaching into his waistband. He pulled out the Sig Sauer P226. He checked the magazine. 12 rounds left. He handed the weapon to Cass. She looked at the cold steel, then at him. "I don't know how to use this," she admitted. "You need to learn now," Liam said, his tone serious but calm. He guided her hands, showing her how to grip the weapon, how to align the sights. "It's not magic. It's a machine. Safety is here. Don't put your finger on the trigger until you are ready to destroy what is in front of you. Squeeze. Don't pull." Cass held the gun, feeling its weight. It was terrifying, but it was also empowering. For the first time, she held the means to defend her own life. "We move in 10 minutes, Liam said, patting Titan, who was watching the cave entrance. "We need to reach the high ground at Devil's Drop. It's a choke point. We can bottle them up there." They left the cave just as the sun began to dip, casting long, twisted shadows through the trees. The baying of the dogs was louder now, a frantic, hungry sound. Silas and his team had found the trap. One of the mercenaries was screaming, his legs shattered by the whipping stake, but it hadn't stopped them. It had only made them angry. Liam pushed the pace, practically dragging Cass up the steep incline. They broke through the tree-line onto a narrow, rocky ledge known as Devil's Drop. On one side was a sheer granite wall. On the other, 100 FT drop into the churning river below. The path narrowed to a single file. It was the perfect defensive position, but they were exposed. "Go!" Liam shouted, pointing to a cluster of boulders at the far end. "Get behind cover." Before they could reach the rocks, a bullet chipped the stone inches from Liam's head. The crack of a high-powered rifle echoed through the canyon. "Suppressing fire!" a voice roared. Silas and his remaining men poured out of the tree-line 50 yards away. They didn't rush. They spread out, using the trees for cover, laying down a wall of lead. Liam dove behind a fallen log, pulling Cass down with him. He returned fire. 2 controlled shots that sent the mercenaries ducking, but they were pinned. "We can't stay here," Liam yelled over the gunfire. "They're flanking." A mercenary had climbed the ridge above them, aiming down at their exposed position. Titan saw the threat before Liam did. The mercenary on the ridge raised his rifle, having a clear shot at Cass. With a feral roar, the German shepherd launched himself from cover. He scrambled up the near-vertical rock face, claws scrabbling for purchase. "Titan, no!" Liam screamed. The mercenary panicked, swinging his rifle toward the charging beast. He fired. A yelp of pain cut through the battle noise as a bullet grazed Titan's shoulder, spinning the dog around, but the momentum carried Titan forward. He slammed into the man, his jaws clamping onto the mercenaire's boot, dragging him off the ledge. The man fell, screaming, crashing onto the path below. Titan landed heavily, limping, blood staining his dark fur, but he scrambled back to Liam's side, refusing to stay down. The distraction was all Liam needed. In the momentary chaos, Silas, the leader, stepped out from behind a tree to direct his men. It was a fatal error. Liam didn't hesitate. He rose from behind the log, exposing himself to fire. He didn't spray bullets. He took a single breath, aligned his sights, and fired 1 round. The bullet struck Silas squarely in the chest. The tracker dropped like a stone, his radio clattering to the rocks. The remaining mercenaries froze, their leadership decapitated. "Move now," Liam commanded. He grabbed Cass with one hand and supported the limping Titan with the other. They scrambled around the bend of the cliff, disappearing from the line of fire. Behind them, the mercenaries were in disarray, shouting conflicting orders. Liam checked Titan's wound. It was a flesh wound, painful, but not life-threatening. He looked at Cass. She was pale, clutching the gun he had given her, but she was still moving. They had survived the ambush, but the gunshot that killed Silas would echo far beyond the forest. They had just killed a professional. Julian Bain wouldn't just send mercenaries next time. He would bring down the sky. The abandoned ranger station, known locally as Eagle's Nest, perched precariously on a rocky outcropping overlooking the valley of Oak Haven. It was a relic of a bygone era, dusty and smelling of pine resin and neglect, but its walls were thick and its vantage point was commanding. Liam Brown stood by the shattered window, peering through the slats of the shutters at the town far below. Now just a cluster of twinkling lights amidst the encroaching darkness. Titan, his shoulder bandaged but his spirit unbroken, lay near the rusted wood stove, chewing methodically on a piece of dried venison Liam had found in his survival kit. The chase had ended, but the war was far from over. Liam turned to Cassidy Vance, who was trying to clean the mud from her face with a damp rag. The fear that had defined her expression for the last 24 hours was gone, replaced by a hardened resolve. "We stop running," Liam stated, his voice low and devoid of uncertainty. "Defense is a losing game. As long as we run, Vane holds the initiative. He has the money, the men, and the time. We need to take those away from him." Cass stopped scrubbing. "You're going back down there," she stated, not as a question but as a realization. "Alone?" "Not alone," Liam corrected, nodding at the dog. "But you stay here. It's safe. There's a landline in the back office. It's dead, but the line itself is intact. If I don't come back by dawn, you follow the ridgeline north to the highway and flag down a state trooper." Liam geared up, checking his stolen weapons. He had the mercenary's assault rifle now along with his own sidearm. He moved with the ritualistic precision of a soldier preparing for battle. "I'm going to cut off his right arm," Liam explained, checking the chamber of the rifle. "Vane's power isn't just violence, it's money. He pays off the sheriff. He hires the mercenaries. I take away the cash. The loyalty evaporates." He looked at Cass one last time, a silent exchange of trust passing between them before slipping out into the night with Titan. But Cass had no intention of sitting idle in the dust and cold. She waited until Liam's silhouette vanished into the tree-line. Then she moved. She knew Oak Haven in a way Liam never could. She knew the people, the hidden paths, and the secrets. She didn't hike north. She hiked east down a goat trail that led to the isolated cabin of Tobias Miller. Tobias was a retired logger, 70 years old, with hands like gnarled roots and a beard like steel wool. He had lost his pension when Vane bought the mill, and he nursed a quiet, burning hatred for the crime lord. When Cass pounded on his door, breathless and wild-eyed, Tobias didn't ask questions. He listened to her plan. "Liam is bringing the war to Julian's front door," Cass explained urgently. "The family's living in the tenements near the estate. They'll be in the crossfire. We need to get them out quietly." Tobias grabbed his coat and his keys to an old rusted bus he used to haul firewood. "I'll rouse the boys," Tobias grunted. "We'll get them out. Vane won't see us coming." Cass wasn't just a victim anymore. She was the logistical commander of the resistance. Meanwhile, Liam and Titan infiltrated the sleeping town of Oak Haven like shadows passing through smoke. Their target was not the lumber mill or the estate, but the Velvet Lounge, a dilapidated theater on Main Street that had been under renovation for 5 years. In reality, the basement housed the largest illegal gambling operation in 3 counties, the beating heart of Julian Payne's financial empire. The man running it was Victor Krell, Julian's accountant and right hand when it came to money. Victor was a man of 35, dressed in an impeccably tailored but garish suit with slicked back hair and a nervous tic that made him constantly adjust his cufflinks. He was currently in the basement counting the night's take. Stacks of dirty cash wrapped in rubber bands while a dozen armed guards patrolled the floor where roulette wheels and poker tables buzzed with activity. Liam didn't knock. He went to the power box in the alleyway and cut the main line. The Velvet Lounge plunged into darkness. Panic erupted inside. Patrons screamed, overturning tables in the blackness. The emergency lights flickered on, bathing the room in an eerie red industrial glow. That was when the back doors exploded inward. Liam didn't enter guns blazing to kill. He entered to dominate. He threw a flashbang grenade, liberated from the mercenaries into the center of the room. The deafening bang and blinding white light disoriented everyone. "Everybody out!" Liam's voice roared, amplified by the acoustics of the basement. "Leave the money. Get out and you live." The patrons didn't need to be told twice. They trampled over each other to reach the exits. The guards, blinded and confused, tried to raise their weapons, but Titan was a blur of motion. The dog didn't bite to kill. He struck the hands holding guns, his terrifying bark echoing like cannon fire. He was a creature of nightmare in the flashing red light, herding the gunmen into corners. Liam moved through the chaos with surgical efficiency. He disarmed a guard with a swift strike to the throat, used the man as a shield to shove another into a poker table, and advanced toward the cage where the money was kept. Victor Krell cowered behind the glass partition, frantically trying to stuff cash into a duffel bag. Liam shattered the glass with the butt of his rifle. He grabbed Victor by the lapels of his expensive suit and hauled him over the counter. "The safe!" Liam commanded. "Open it!" Victor, shaking so hard his teeth chattered, fumbled with the combination. The heavy steel door swung open, revealing rows of stacked bills. Millions. The lifeblood of the vain criminal enterprise. Liam shoved Victor toward the exit. "Run," he said coldly. "Tell Julian his bank is closed." Victor scrambled away, slipping on playing cards and spilled drinks. Liam looked at the money. He didn't take a dime. He wasn't a thief. He grabbed bottles of high-proof alcohol from the bar and smashed them over the stacks of cash inside the safe and on the counting tables. He struck a flare, the red flame hissing in the damp air. "Burn!" he whispered, tossing the flare into the safe. The alcohol ignited with a whoosh, the fire hungry and immediate. The flames licked up the walls, consuming the green paper that Julian Vane valued more than human life. The heat was intense, blistering the paint on the walls. Liam whistled. Titan broke off his intimidation of the remaining guards and bounded to Liam's side. The fire suppression system, which Liam had disabled upon entry, remained silent. Outside on the rainy street, a crowd had gathered, curious locals and the fleeing gamblers. They watched as smoke began to billow from the theater doors. Then silence fell over the crowd. Through the swirling gray smoke and the orange glow of the inferno behind him, a figure emerged. Liam walked out calmly, his silhouette framed by the fire, his weapon held low. Titan walked beside him, looking like a hellhound returned to Earth. They didn't run. They didn't look back. The gangsters who had stumbled out stood frozen, too terrified to raise their weapons. The image of the man and the beast, untouched by the flames that were devouring their empire, was seared into their minds. It was a message written in ash and fire. The predator had become the prey. Liam disappeared into the alleyway, melting back into the night, leaving the burning heart of Julian Bane's power to illuminate the dark sky of Oak Haven. The burning shell of the Velvet Lounge cast a long, flickering shadow over Main Street, but the heat of the fire was nothing compared to the icy grip of terror that had seized Oak Haven. The town was silent, huddled behind locked doors, waiting for the final thunderclap of a storm that had been brewing for decades. High upon the hill, the Vane estate sat like a brooding gargoyle, its windows dark, but its perimeter bristling with the last remnants of Julian Bane's paid army. Inside the mansion's opulent study, the air-rire of stale scotch and desperation. Julian Vane, the untouchable king of the mountain, was unraveling. His hair was disheveled, his tie undone, and his eyes darted around the room with the frantic energy of a trapped rat. Kneeling on the Persian rug before him was Sheriff Brody Miller. The lawman's face was bruised, his uniform torn. Miller had come to resign, to beg for a way out before the feds arrived. But Julian saw only betrayal. He saw a loose end. Julian grabbed the microphone of the town's emergency broadcast system, a relic from the Cold War installed in his private bunker, but linked to the sirens and speakers throughout the valley. He flipped the switch. Feedback squealed across the town, piercing the night like a banshee's scream, waking babies and freezing the blood of every resident. Liam Brown. Julian's voice boomed, distorted and metallic, echoing off the canyon walls. "You think you can burn my money and walk away? You think you're a hero?" Julian laughed, a jagged, unstable sound. "I have the sheriff here. I have the law. Come to the house, hero. Come finish it, or I start executing the people who let you into my town, starting with the good sheriff." He released the button, the silence that followed heavier than the noise. In the darkness of the treine surrounding the estate, Liam adjusted the strap of the assault rifle he had taken from the mercenaries. He checked his sidearm, then his knife. He wasn't surprised by the ultimatum. Men like Julian always tried to control the narrative when they lost control of the situation. Liam looked down at Titan. The German shepherd was vibrating with anticipation. His eyes locked on Liam's face, waiting for the command. This wasn't a stealth mission anymore. It was a rescue operation and an execution wrapped in one. "We do it the hard way, buddy," Liam whispered, scratching the dog behind the ears. "You take the low road. I'll knock on the front door." He pointed toward a drainage grate half hidden by overgrown ferns. The outflow of the estate's stormwater system. Titan understood. He had been trained to navigate tight, dark spaces where men couldn't go. With a soft whine, the dog slipped into the grate and vanished into the subterranean dark. Inside the concrete pipe, the smell was overwhelming. Mold, rot, and the metallic tang of rust. Titan crawled on his belly, the water cold against his fur. He moved by scent and sound, his paws finding purchase on the slimy concrete. Above him, he could hear the muffled thrum of a generator. That was his target. Liam had shown him the schematics in the ranger station pointing to the power junction. Titan didn't know schematics, but he knew the hum of electricity. He emerged into the basement maintenance room, a vast space filled with humming machinery. A guard sat by the door reading a magazine. Titan didn't bark. He launched from the shadows, a silent missile. The guard didn't even have time to shout before Titan's weight drove him to the floor. The dog's muzzle pressing the man's throat closed until he went limp. Titan then turned to the main breaker box. He couldn't cut wires with tools, but he could destroy. He grabbed the thick bundle of cables leading to the main panel with his powerful jaws and yanked with the force of a wolf tearing at a carcass. Sparks showered down, singing his whiskers, but he pulled until the copper snapped. At the exact moment the estate plunged into darkness, Liam breached the main gate. He didn't climb it. He blew the hinges with a shaped charge he had improvised from road flares and black powder found in the ranger station. The explosion was deafening, a declaration of intent. As the heavy iron gates twisted and fell, the emergency lights flickered on inside the mansion, dim, red, and disorienting. The guards in the courtyard, blinded by the sudden shift from floodlights to darkness, were in chaos. "Hold the line!" someone screamed. Liam moved through the smoke like a phantom. He didn't run in a straight line. He moved from cover to cover, a stone planter, a parked limousine, a fountain. He fired in controlled bursts. He wasn't shooting to kill the hired security, who were just local boys and over their heads. He shot to suppress, targeting legs and shoulders or shooting the weapons out of their hands. He reached the massive oak front doors and kicked them open. The grand foyer was a cavernous space of black marble and gold leaf dominated by a sweeping double staircase. Standing at the top of the stairs was Julian Vane, illuminated by the eerie glow of the emergency lighting. He held a customized gold-plated Desert Eagle in one hand and dragged the battered Sheriff Miller with the other, using the heavy man as a shield. "Welcome to my house!" Julian screamed, his voice cracking. He fired wildly. The large-caliber bullet smashed into the marble floor near Liam's feet, sending stone shrapnel flying. Liam dove behind a marble pillar. "It's over, Vane!" Liam shouted. "The feds are an hour out. Drop the gun!" "I am the law here," Julian roared. He shoved Miller down the stairs. The sheriff tumbled like a rag doll, landing in a heap at the bottom, groaning but alive. Julian used the distraction to descend, firing as he moved. Liam popped out to return fire, but his rifle clicked empty. He tossed it aside and drew his sidearm. Julian was closing the distance, manic energy making him reckless. He fired again. This time his aim was true. The bullet caught Liam in the left shoulder, punching through the tactical vest and shattering the clavicle. The impact spun Liam around, dropping him to one knee. Pain, white-hot and blinding, exploded in his nerves. His left arm went useless, hanging limp at his side. He tried to raise his pistol with his right hand, but shock delayed his reaction. Julian stood over him 10 ft away, a twisted smile on his face. He leveled the massive hand cannon at Liam's head. "You should have kept driving, Drifter," Julian sneered, his finger tightening on the trigger. Time seemed to slow down. Liam looked up, seeing the rifling inside the barrel. He was going to die. Then a black blur erupted from the shadows of the hallway leading to the kitchen. Titan had found his way up. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He was a silent projectile of pure loyalty. He launched himself into the air, clearing the space between them in a heartbeat. Julian saw the movement too late. He tried to pivot, but Titan's jaws clamped onto his right forearm, the gun hand. The sound of bone crunching was audible even over the ringing in Liam's ears. Julian screamed, a sound of primal agony as the gun clattered to the floor. The force of the dog's impact knocked Julian backward. Titan didn't let go. He shook his head violently, dragging the crime lord to the ground. Julian punched the dog with his free hand, screaming curses. But Titan was a machine made of muscle and fur, protecting his pack leader. Liam fought through the pain. He gritted his teeth, forcing his body to move. He lunged forward, tackling Julian. "Titan!" Liam commanded, his voice ragged. The dog instantly released the mangled arm and stepped back, standing over Julian, chest heaving, teeth bared, ready to strike again if needed. Liam straddled Julian, pinning him to the cold marble. He drew his combat knife with his good hand and pressed the blade against Julian's throat. Julian froze, his eyes wide with the realization of his own mortality. "Do it," Julian hissed, blood bubbling from his lip. "Kill me! Make yourself a murderer!" The rage in Liam was a living thing. He wanted to end it. He wanted to carve the cancer out of this town. His knuckles turned white on the handle of the knife. The tip dug into the skin. "Liam, don't." The voice cut through the red haze. Cass stood at the open front doors, breathless, her clothes torn, flanked by Tobias Miller and a few other locals armed with hunting rifles. She ran into the hall, ignoring the blood and the danger. She dropped to her knees beside them, putting her hand over Liam's hand on the knife. "He's not worth it," she implored, her eyes locking onto Liam's. "You're not him. You saved us. Don't throw your life away for a piece of trash like this." Liam looked at her, then at Titan, then at the trembling, broken man beneath him. The sirens were close now, real sirens, blue and red lights flashing through the windows. The FBI and the state police had finally arrived. Liam took a shuddering breath and pulled the knife away. He stood up, swaying slightly, his left side soaked in blood. He looked down at Julian. "You're right," Liam rasped. "He's not worth the bullet." He holstered his knife and stepped back. Julian lay there sobbing, cradling his ruined arm, as the first squad of tactical officers stormed the room, weapons drawn. The war for Oak Haven was over. The chaotic symphony of sirens that had signaled the end of Julian Bain's reign was soon drowned out by the rhythmic thumping roar of approaching rotors. Two MH-60 Blackhawk helicopters painted in dark matte, tactical gray, descended through the breaking dawn mist, blowing the lingering smoke from the ruined velvet lounge across the town square. They landed on the manicured lawn of the Vane estate, flattening the prized rose bushes that Julian had prized almost as much as his illicit empire. Men in full tactical gear poured out, but these weren't local deputies or hired guns. They were federal agents and military police moving with the terrifying efficiency of the United States government when it finally decides to pay attention. Leading them was a man who looked like he was carved from the same granite as the mountains surrounding Oak Haven. Commander Mike Iron Sterling strode across the gravel driveway, ignoring the chaos of the local police securing the perimeter. He was dressed in fatigues, his presence demanding immediate difference. He walked straight to where Liam Brown sat on the bumper of an ambulance, a field medic finishing the dressing on his shattered shoulder. Titan sat between Liam's legs, his muzzle stained with dried blood, growling low in his throat at anyone who came within 5 FT. Sterling held up a hand to stop his MPs from raising their weapons at the dog. He knew Titan. He knew that the dog was the only reason his best operator was still breathing. Julian Bain was dragged out of his mansion in handcuffs, screaming about lawyers, jurisdiction, and lawsuits. He looked small now, stripped of his guards and his guns, just a middle-aged man in a torn suit facing a lifetime in a federal supermax. Special Agent Rossi, a sharp-featured woman with eyes that missed nothing, met Sterling at the ambulance. She was the FBI liaison, efficient, and by the book. She briefed Sterling that the evidence Liam had secured, the photos of the arms deal, the destroyed lab, and the testimony of the flipped Sheriff Miller was enough to bury Vane for 3 lifetimes. However, there was the matter of the unauthorized operation. Sterling looked at Liam, who was wincing as he stood up. "You made a mess, Brown," Sterling said, his voice grawly but lacking real heat. "I told you to lay low. Instead, you started a civil war." Liam met his commander's gaze, his face pale from blood loss, but his eyes defiant. "I didn't start it, sir. I finished it. The arms pipeline is severed." Sterling sighed, looking at the burning town below. "The brass is calling it a joint task force interdiction to cover our asses. You're cleared of the rogue status, provided you disappear. Right now we have a bird spinning up. You have a new assignment in Yemen. Wheels up in 20. The town of Oak Haven was waking up to a new reality. The fog was lifting, revealing a sun that seemed brighter than it had been in years. People were emerging from their homes, gathering at the edge of the estate, watching the dismantling of the Vane dynasty. Cassidy Vance stood near the destroyed front gates, watching the helicopters. She looked different, bruised, exhausted, her clothes ruined, but standing tall. She wasn't the terrified waitress anymore. She was a survivor. Liam walked toward her, his left arm in a sling, Titan limping proudly at his side. The MPs held back the crowd, but they let Liam pass. The silence between them was heavy, filled with everything that didn't need to be said. They stood at the boundary of the estate where the manicured lawn met the wild forest. "So, this is it," Cass said, her voice soft. "The cavalry comes, and the Lone Ranger rides off." Liam managed a crooked, painful smile. "I'm no ranger, Cass, just a sailor who took a wrong turn." He reached into his tactical vest with his good hand and pulled out a heavy canvas bank bag. He pressed it into her hands. It was heavy. "I didn't burn it all," Liam whispered. "I pulled this from the safe before I lit the flare. It's untraceable. Consider it a severance package from Vane Enterprises. Pay off your house. Fix the diner. Start over." Cass looked at the bag, tears welling in her eyes, not for the money, but for the gesture. She didn't argue. She knew he wouldn't take it back. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a simple braided leather bracelet with a small polished river stone woven into the center. "My mother made this," she said, taking his right hand and sliding it over his wrist. "She said it guides lost travelers home. You saved my life, Liam. You gave this town a chance to breathe." Liam looked at the bracelet, a simple trinket compared to the tactical gear he wore, but it felt heavier, more significant. "Thank you, Cass," he said. He whistled to Titan. The dog nudged Cass's hand one last time, a wet nose pressing against her palm. A silent goodbye from a warrior to a friend. "Take care of him," Cass whispered to the dog. "He's all you've got," Liam nodded. "We take care of each other." Sterling's voice crackled over the radio. "Brown now." Liam turned back to the waiting SUV that would take him to the chopper. He didn't say goodbye. He simply nodded, a soldier's acknowledgement, and turned away. He climbed into the passenger seat of the black government vehicle. Titan hopped into the back. As the car pulled away, navigating the winding road down the hill, the sun finally broke over the crest of the mountains, flooding the valley with golden light. It washed over the charred remains of the casino, the broken gates of the estate, and the people of Oak Haven, who were standing in the streets, free for the first time in a decade. Liam watched the scenery roll by, the pain in his shoulder, a dull throb. He felt the leather bracelet on his wrist. As the car rounded the final bend that would take them out of the valley forever, Titan sat up in the back seat. The great dog turned his head, looking back through the rear window at the shrinking figure of Cassidy Vance standing by the gate. Liam looked in the side mirror, catching one last glimpse of her. She wasn't crying. She was smiling, a fierce, hopeful smile. She raised a hand in farewell. Liam didn't wave back, but he held her gaze in the mirror until the road turned and Oak Haven vanished behind the trees. They were moving on to the next fight, the next war. But for the first time in a long time, Liam Brown didn't feel like he was drifting. He felt like he had left something good behind. The engine roared, driving them into the sunrise, into the shadow of the next trident, but guided by the memory of the light they had found in the rain. If this story touched your heart, please share it with your friends and family to spread this message of courage and hope. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a journey with us. I pray that God blesses every single one of you listening to this story today. May the Lord grant you the courage of a warrior and the heart of a guardian. May He give you the strength to stand firm against the storms of life, just as Liam stood against the rain in Oak Haven. I pray that you never feel alone in your battles, that you always have a loyal friend by your side, and that God protects you and your family from all harm. If you believe in the power of protecting the weak and trusting in God's plan, please type Amen in the comments below to claim this blessing for yourself and your loved ones. Let's fill the comments with faith and strength. Thank you for watching, and may God walk with you until we meet again.